Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. And we're going to get right into this Q&A and just get into everybody's thoughts and comments after this crazy weekend of fights and things like that. And so the first one we're going to go off to, the first question is going to be from One Flyboy. Now, One Flyboy, we have a history. We've debated a lot of topics and we go back and forth. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't. It looks like we're not going to be agreeing this time, but let's just dig into his comment. He starts off saying, you say that Spence is ducking Crawford if he doesn't fight him next. My question is, do you consider Canelo ducking Triple G when he gave up his belt and waited 2 years later when Triple G was falling out of his prime? And if so, why is all forgiven and he can sit atop the pound for pound rankings by making a guy wait 2 years, but your deadline for two guys in their prime is the next fight, when the biggest fights in boxing due to business sometimes may take a fight or two to get sorted out. So One Flyboy, I'd love to just dig right into this comment. So let's start off with the Canelo Triple G. And see, that thing really holds no bearings or no arguments, because first, neither one, Spence or Crawford, are at the level that Canelo Alvarez is. First of all, Canelo Alvarez is the biggest star in boxing. He can sell a pay-per-view. He's a clear A-side. When you look at Crawford versus Spence, because of Spence's hype and because of Crawford's resume, these guys are a 50-50 fight as far as what each guy brings to the table as far as viewerships and fandom. So these guys are 50-50 down the line. There's no clear A-side when it comes to, who's the more, the fighter who's bringing the most money to the table. It's pretty even. It's 50-50 along those financial lines. But with Canelo Alvarez, he's clearly the A-side in any negotiations with any fighter. He's going to always be able to dictate terms. Period. Now, if you look at, Canelo Alvarez, he fought Liam Smith at 154 pounds in 2016. His next fight in 2017 was Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And when he fought Chavez Jr., that was his fight to prepare him for the bigger fighters, the bigger weight class. And that was Gennady Golovkin, was his very next fight the same year. So there was no 2-year wait. That was the fight that he was set to take. Period. Because he fought Gennady Golovkin later that year. He fought Chavez earlier that year. And prior to that, he was in a completely different weight class fighting a Liam Beefy Smith. So you have to be honest and unbiased when you recite things, because it sounds like you're just upset and emotional about Errol Spence, but there's no reason to be upset or emotional. Errol Spence is a very good and talented fighter, but it's clear that he does not want this fight. So, the funny thing about Errol Spence is he comes out and states, these guys won't fight me. I'm trying to get a fight. Porter won't fight me. Thurman won't fight me. These guys don't want to fight me. But when Crawford keeps calling your name and you won't even respond, what does that tell you? Don't worry, I'll wait. Next question. This one comes from Big L. Big L states, after watching the Bud fight last night, I think a real fan should boycott all those clowns at 147 pounds. Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman, and especially Errol Spence. If neither one of them fight Crawford, the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world, next. Enough is enough. And I agree with you, Big L. To be honest and unbiased, none of these guys have an interest in fighting Terence Bud Crawford, because at the end of the day, they know what Terence Bud Crawford is. They know he's an elite level fighter. They know he's the type of guy that'll wear you down and stop you late in the fight. And if Terence Crawford doesn't stop you, he's going to put on a boxing clinic and humiliate you. You're not going to be the same fighter. These guys feel some kind of way that a guy from 140 is moving up and dominating their division, and he won a world title in his first fight at 147. Terence Crawford has the most skills of anybody in the 147-pound division, period. He can box, he can punch, he can break you down, he can switch. He is a problem for literally anyone, and none of these guys want to take that risk, because if you look at it, Terence Crawford and any of these guys will be their highest payday. Terence Crawford and any of these guys would make any of these guys number one pound for pound if they were to beat Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford and any of these guys would be a unification fight, except for Danny Garcia, since he has no belt. So beating a Terence Crawford, having the opportunity to get past Terence Crawford should be enough, because you're getting a high payday, you're getting a chance to win a belt, and you're becoming a pound-for-pound fighter after one fight. So if you're confident that you can beat Terence Crawford, why not take it? You remember Keith Thurman is the first one that said Terence Crawford is not a true welterweight, and he has so much to prove. If he's easy work, why not fight him? Errol Spence Jr. said he's too small, he'll stop him. Okay, well, go stop him, get the belt. It's strap season, right? But I find it funny that Errol Spence says strap season when he fought a Mikey Garcia who had no belt at 147. And now he's wanting to fight a Manny Pacquiao who has no belt at 147. But it's strap season though, right? So Errol Spence Jr. says strap season, but he really means I want to fight the small guy season. Let's be honest and unbiased. But the next one comes from Maldonado S. He states, after Crawford's last fight, I expected Spence to continue ducking Crawford. What do you think? So we'll start with the first part of this question. Absolutely. I don't see any change from Errol Spence, and I think Terence Crawford must look to the next biggest fight. And I think the next biggest fight is what Kell Brook has been, saying that he would still like to fight Terence Crawford next. Kell Brook saying that, if Errol Spence Jr. does not take this fight, does not take this opportunity, he gladly will. And I think that that's where Terence Bud Crawford needs to look next is Kell Brook, because that'll be another fight, another top welterweight, another guy he can, just continue to build off of. But Maldonado also says, I also expect the LDBC and Spence fangirls to shit on Crawford's dominant performance by calling Khan washed up and a glass jaw, yet I don't see a single name on Spence's resume that has accomplishments of Khan. Mikey is Spence's best name, and the guy is a lightweight. And that is all facts, Maldonado. So, you have to understand that Mikey and Khan were supposed to be looked at completely different, because Mikey's moving up 2 weight classes. Amir Khan, he fights at welterweight. This is his weight that he should be at. And the fact that Errol Spence Jr. couldn't stop Mikey and Crawford stopped Khan, that should tell you a lot. Errol Spence Jr., you hear the fanboy statements, oh, he didn't try to stop Mikey. He tried to stop Mikey because it's good for him to stop Mikey. It helps his resume. It helps his brand. He's supposed to be man down. And there was no man down. But let's just keep going. Rudy Morales says, how much credit do you give Crawford for his win against Khan? He was clearly winning the fight, but at the same time, Khan is a guy who's been stopped before and wobbled many times in his career. You're absolutely right, Rudy. And, you have to look at who beat Amir Khan. Who beat Amir Khan? Canelo Alvarez beat Amir Khan, and that's an elite level fighter, one of the best, if not the best, pound for pound fighter in the world. And not only that, Amir Khan has been stopped by British Prescott, things like that. But you also have to look at it. That doesn't diminish the type of fighter Amir Khan is. He's still an elite level boxer. And we all knew that Terence Crawford was going to stop Khan, but he was giving him a beating at times in this fight. So at the end of the day, Terence Bud Crawford does get credit for it, but it's not going to make Terence Bud Crawford jumped leaps and bounds over everyone else. It just means it was a quality, solid win for Terence Crawford at welterweight. I think it's just as good as being a Danny Garcia or, a Sean Porter. Because even though Sean Porter's a world champion, he's already been beat twice. So, we're looking at this Amir Khan with the right goggles on, and we expected Terence Crawford to get this win because he's supposed to be number 1 or number 2 pound for pound in the world. So if Terence Crawford is the best fighter in the world, you expected him to look dominant and impressive, and that's exactly how he looked. So, this doesn't change how we view Terence Crawford. This fight does nothing of that effect, but it does show that it's a quality, solid win at welterweight, and he's taking the biggest names possible. Great question. The next one comes from Junior Moreno. Looking at Lomachenko's record, not counting the amateur records and achievements, what other fighters might as well be considered pound for pound? Also looking at Loma's record, what other fighters could easily destroy all of Loma's past lineups? I think that's a good question, Junior. I would probably say Mikey Garcia. He could probably run through everybody on Loma's past records, and he already ran through Orlando Salido. So, that's just, in comparison, the first name that I could think of that could destroy all of Lomachenko's opponents, and probably in better fashion. And, Lomachenko is a very special fighter, an elite level fighter, a top talented fighter. My thing is, I just think that Lomachenko needs to be challenged. He needs the type of fighter that's going to bring out the best in him. And the only way to see the best of a fighter is to truly be challenged. I don't subscribe to the theory of Lomachenko's too small to move up. My personal opinion is that he can compete at 140 because he has the skill set to do so. I understand those guys are bigger, but that's part of being an elite level, great history making fighter. Now, if that's not Lomachenko's goal, if he just simply wants to unify the division and contend at 135 and 130, so be it. I will not criticize him for that. That is his prerogative. That's where he believes he's feel most comfortable. That's fine. But I do think if he wants to be remembered as one of the greatest ever, he must challenge himself against a very top level fighter, and he has no fighter the level or experience of a Mikey Garcia. I understand it's not his fault, but at the end of the day, you must find one, because if you don't, you will be looked at as the guy who was missing that piece. But let's keep going. Frankly speaking, states Bob Arum states he wants Crawford and Spence, but it is PBC who is not willing. I believe that they're going to delay the fight as long as possible. Spence will fight Porter, Garcia, Thurman, Pacquiao, Crawford will be begging for a top contender for a fight. Crawford is the real boogeyman, but needs to get rid of Bob Arum. Your thoughts? I don't think Bob Arum is the problem. Bob Arum is offering these guys huge money. And, the real problem is, if you look at it, these guys don't want to fight Terence Crawford. You have to understand that Bob Arum wouldn't make a difference, because think about it like this. Let's say Terence Bud Crawford was, I don't know, Sean Porter or Danny Garcia. These guys would fight him cross-promotionally. They wouldn't mind fighting Terence Crawford. They wouldn't mind. Al Heyman wouldn't mind sending Errol Spence over to ESPN, or working together in a joint venture, because they feel like Danny Garcia is beatable. They beatable. They feel like Sean Porter's beatable. But the fact that they feel like Terence Crawford is a threat because he's an elite level fighter, they don't want to take a chance on losing against the top guy, a guy that they've seen unify, a guy that they've seen with elite level skills, a guy that's proven, a guy that won a world title in his first fight. It's not Bob Arum that's holding up the fight. It's the other welterweights knowing how good Terence Bud Crawford truly is. They know that Terence Bud Crawford is no joke. They know that Terence Bud Crawford is a problem, and that's why they don't want to fight him. Valerio Aguero says, how many skills does Crawford have? How many skills does Spence have? And I don't think it's necessarily how many skills does each guy have. I mean, I couldn't tell you that offhand, but what I can tell you is Crawford has way more skills than Errol Spence, because we haven't seen Errol Spence Jr. outbox any fighter except for Mikey, and Mikey was 2 divisions lower than him. We need to see Spence do that to a pure welterweight. We haven't seen Spence display the ability to switch and to adjust like Terence Bud Crawford. We've seen Spence take a lot of punishment from natural welterweights and guys his own size in his own weight class. But let's keep going. Silver Aldo says, will Spence handle the IQ of Crawford? I highly doubt it. Spence is, the very basic fighter up and down. He's just extremely large, big, and, for the division. And that's what gives him his advantages over these guys, because they're much smaller. And he's draining himself down to make the weight to be able to have an advantage over these guys. Great question. The next question comes from SwissKid316. Do you think it's pretty dumb that the PBC reporters keep asking boxers if they want to fight Manny Pacquiao? Like, what the fuck? Why don't they ask them if they want to fight the top welterweights, meaning each other, including Terence Crawford? See, these guys, they know, the PBC, the reporters already know that these guys, they have to act like Terence Crawford doesn't exist. They act like Manny Pacquiao is the true prize. They act like beating Manny Pacquiao is equivalent to beating Terence Crawford, and it's not. Because if you were beating a prime Manny, then that's a totally different story. If you were beating a Manny at his best, that's a different story. But you beating an old Manny past his prime is meaningless. Because at this point, if Manny was fighting any of these PBC fighters and he was in his prime, I would favor Manny in every fight. But the fact that Manny is no longer in his prime, the fact that Manny is well past his expiration date, I don't think Manny could necessarily beat all these guys, but I think Manny has a shot to beat these guys. I don't think he necessarily will beat all of them. Great question. The next one comes from JB. When Crawford fights, it's like a cat playing with a mouse, who stylistically, besides Spence, gives Crawford the most problems at 147. I honestly always thought that Keith Thurman would, because, it's the fight. I think that Spence doesn't give Crawford the problems that people think he will. Everyone always says that Errol Spence is this very difficult fight for Terence Crawford. I think that's probably one of the easier fights for Terence Crawford. I think just because of his size advantage is not going to make a difference, because Bud has the reach advantage over Spence. Bud has the IQ advantage over Spence. Bud has the experience over Spence. Bud has levels of accomplishments above Errol Spence Jr. and in experience, but he also has the skills. And so I think that that's what's going to make that a much easy fight for, Terence Crawford. But I think the hardest fight for Terence Crawford is going to be the Keith Thurman fight, if Keith Thurman is back to who he was, because Keith Thurman actually has a lot of different skill sets and he can adjust very well. So I think that'll be the more challenging fight, because he's going to make Bud think. I don't think Errol Spence Jr. has the ability to do that. Let's keep going. Gentle Uprising said, I'm just disappointed with Khan. It was a low blow, but he clearly quit the fight. I was really surprised at the power and accuracy Terence Crawford showed against Khan. I knew he was good, but I never thought he was that good. I see him running over Spence, but Pacquiao would be an interesting fight to see him in. Who would you like to see Crawford fight against next? Well, we pretty much know that none of the PBC fighters want to fight Terence Crawford. So I feel like the next fight against Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, we are now going to duck the fight. No one from the PBC is going to take the fight. But I do think that Terence Crawford would ultimately end up fighting Kell Brook, because Kell Brook is probably not going to fight Amir Khan at this point in his career, and he's probably going to end up fighting Terence Crawford next. I think the fact that he's been vocal about that, I think that's the most likely fight. That's the most obvious fight to make. The next one comes from Leonardo Navarrete. He says, I got to disagree with you. It was Manny holding up the fight. Mayweather was looking after his health, suspecting Pacquiao of steroids, demanding he be tested, and he refused. You're absolutely right, Leonardo. I forgot all about that. Very good point. Touche. Eduardo Sanchez says, I think Spence is going to fight Sean Porter next, and Crawford is going to fight Kell Brook. Then after that, if Spence beats Sean, he would have 2 belts, so it would make him the A side in the fight negotiations. That's very possible, but I don't think Spence would take Crawford next either. You have to understand that Spence has a long-term plan, and his long-term plan is to avoid Terence Crawford and possibly move up to 154. The writing is on the wall. If he fights and beats, Sean Porter, he doesn't want 2 belts and then fight him. He wants to fight Keith Thurman later as possible. Ultimately, his goal is to fight every welterweight on the PBC side and then start looking to other fighters. And that's if he stays at 147 from the time being, because we all know that Errol Spence Jr. wants to move up. But once again, Unbiased as always. Please share, like, and you must absolutely subscribe.